Hello, my name is Masheika Allgood. I'm the founder of Ally Consulting LLC, and today I'm going to talk to you about AI data centers and the 21st century sacrifice zone. The unique infrastructure requirements of AI data centers are completely shifting the character and reality of sacrifice zones in the 21st century. This talk will discuss how this shift is playing out locally in the US and consider the global implications of US companies exporting this social architecture to countries around the world. Let's start by defining the term. A sacrifice zone is a geographical area that is subjected to environmental degradation, social marginalization, and economic abandonment after industrial and extractivist activities. The term comes from the US environmental justice movement, but the framework is useful for understanding the societal impacts of AI data centers. Our understanding of sacrifice zones is based on the US practice of redlining. As part of the New Deal in the 1930s, the US government went on a massive spending and infrastructure building campaign. Banks were frontline for managing the spending through providing loans and mortgages. In order to ensure that the resources primarily benefited white Americans, banks began a practice of drawing red lines around neighborhoods with heavy Black or immigrant populations and denying those communities access to loans and mortgages. Local governments used the red lines as a border for government spending, denying those neighborhoods access to services and infrastructure investments. And as the properties fell into disrepair, local governments used the decreased property values as justification to place noisy and polluting industrial facilities in and around those communities. So the term sacrifice zone refers to these neighborhoods whose health was sacrificed so that the broader community could enjoy the benefits of nuisance industrial uses without the health impacts. So how does this relate to data centers? No one's drawing red lines anymore, so how is this framing relevant? The term isn't relevant to data centers in general. It is uniquely relevant to AI data centers. When you look at the nature of a sacrifice zone, it is clear that a community that is hosting an AI data center displays all of the key elements as listed in the definition. Specifically, communities that host AI data centers suffer environmental degradation, social marginalization, and economic abandonment. And I've added a fourth element, physical entrapment, that isn't explicitly included in the sacrifice zone definition, but is an inherent quality. Let's briefly discuss these elements one by one, starting with environmental degradation. AI data centers have a massive environmental footprint that impacts a community's drinking water availability, wastewater treatment capacity, and noise pollution, amongst other things. I'm not going to get deep into all of the various environmental impacts today, but I do want to highlight three areas of concern: air pollution, fire risk, and spill risk. The diesel generators facilities used for alternative power produce a toxic cocktail of fine particle pollution, nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, and sulfur dioxide. Many facilities are sited in converted industrial areas, so there's some level of ambient air pollution already in existence. In my city, there are neighborhoods with PM 2.5 levels that are 140% of the EPA's recommended amount. Data center emissions have a compound air pollution effect that can supercharge already heavily polluted areas. A recent study by Virginia Commonwealth University found that the air pollution generated by the Loudoun County AI data center supercluster sometimes exceeds emissions from nearby power plants. Fires can add an additional massive load of air pollution. The image here is from a fire at a 300 megawatt battery storage facility in California last year. The fire lasted for 2 full days and flared up again a month later. 55,000 batteries were damaged. It took 8 months to develop a plan and start safely removing the batteries. The cleanup will take years. I went to visit some of the data center clusters in San Jose earlier this year and came to a cul-de-sac with a data center at the entrance and one at the roundabout on the other side of the street. There is a substation at each facility, 2 in a single cul-de-sac on opposite sides of the street. Every AI data center has its own substation, which means any AI data center cluster is also a high voltage substation cluster, which is an experimental electrical configuration that we are now testing at scale. While the fire risk for co-locating significant numbers of substations isn't currently known, there is also another power source at these facilities which poses both a fire and spill risk. The newest data center approved in my city uses 3.25 megawatt diesel generators with 9,200 gallon diesel tanks. There are 36 generators at the facility. That's 331,000 gallons of diesel on site at all times at just one AI data center facility. But shockingly, diesel isn't the most concerning spill risk at these facilities. There's a push towards zero water cooling for the server level cooling loops. The closed loop can contain 500,000 gallons of drinking water, so that's significant savings. But what are they replacing the drinking water with? If they're using direct to chip or immersion cooling, or switching out the water in the facility heat exchange pipes, then they're replacing that water with ethylene glycol, hydrocarbon coolants, or dielectric fluorocarbons, better known as antifreeze, motor oil, and forever chemicals. Hundreds of thousands of gallons of them at each zero water facility. For context, the Keystone Pipeline spill in Kansas was a 600,000 gallon spill. A single 99 megawatt data center can house that much motor oil or antifreeze or forever chemicals, and we're building them in clusters. And we're pushing to build gigawatt level facilities that would house exponentially greater capacity of these chemicals. The AI industry's use of non-disclosure agreements to block communities from obtaining information about AI data center resource consumption has been well documented. But communities who host AI data centers are not only deprived of information about the facility's proposal or their impacts, they're also being disenfranchised by the local governments that are meant to represent them. Local governments are partnering with data center developers and approving data centers despite of overwhelming, organized, and vocal local opposition. As communities are increasingly voicing concerns about their environmental and health impacts, increasing utility prices, decreasing property values, minimal long-term job creation, and significant losses on tax exemptions, developers are consistently telling communities that what they see happening around them isn't real. And if any of it is real, it doesn't matter because eventually, at some point in the future, the AI will fix it. The key message to communities as developers and local governments ram these projects through the approval process is it's not that you don't agree with this. It's just that you don't understand the tech or the math or the global implications. We know what's best for you, so we get to make these decisions for you. The reason why communities are turning out in such large numbers to protest so fiercely is because they're starting to see signs of economic abandonment in the cities that currently host AI data centers. Residents without water because their wells ran dry or became too clogged with sediments to be useful. Cities and states having to enact austerity measures because they're losing money on data center tax incentives. Small businesses going out of business because electricity prices are higher than their rent. Young people and young families forced out of communities because they can't compete for housing against the highly paid temporary tradespeople who build the facilities. Wastewater infrastructure being overrun and causing cities to dump toxic levels of sediments on local farmland, poisoning the well water and sickening the populace. The largest data center campuses are the size of small cities. The Meta Hyperion campus will be a fifth of the size of Manhattan. This image superimposes the campus onto the Giza Plateau. You can see the pyramids in the building break in the top left. I've been to Giza, and the plateau and surrounding desert feels incomprehensibly expansive. The Meta facility dwarfs it. When a facility of this size is placed in a community and doesn't bring direct full-time employment or tax revenue, no community benefit agreement can make up the shortfall. These communities see that and are literally fighting for their existence. I added physical entrapment because it's the key reason why sacrifice zones are so devastating. People can't get out. The US is generally immobile. Both household and geographic mobility rates in the US have been declining for decades. People don't often leave urban areas, and when they do, they tend to leave cities altogether. So Americans face some level of physical entrapment as a matter of course. but AI data centers exacerbate that entrapment. Property values plunging in the vicinity of the facilities, locking in existing homeowners, while high rental costs lock in current renters. Negative health outcomes from the various forms of pollution impact people's earning capacity, which limits their savings. Many people who live near AI data centers can't afford to move even if they want to. And the longer they stay, the more unlikely it is that they can leave, which is concerning considering the very real risk of spills and fires. This is a map of data centers in the state of Georgia. Half of the state's population lives in the metro Atlanta region, which hosts 152 data centers. Nearly 700 megawatts of that data center capacity came online in 2024 alone. A major fire or spill at one of these facilities could tip an entire community into financial distress. And given the high population density in the metro Atlanta region, there'd be no real way to relocate everyone who was impacted. Many people, particularly poor, disabled, older, or medically compromised people, would be trapped. And this isn't just an Atlanta or a Georgia issue, it's a universal one. If you take a look at data center maps, you'll see that facilities tend to be clustered in and around population centers, since they tend to have the most robust infrastructure. But the concerns are even more acute in smaller towns, where the populace isn't generally as wealthy and government budgets are much leaner. A single fire or spill could effectively wipe the town out, and those left behind would be left behind. It's that dichotomy between small and large, rich and poor cities that forms the basis of my core assertion in this talk. AI data centers are creating a fundamentally different type of sacrifice zone. Unlike previous sacrifice zones, which were focused in areas with low property values and underinvested infrastructure and services, the AI data center build-out targeted high-income areas first. Traditional sacrifice zones didn't have the infrastructure necessary to support AI data centers. So who's the target for data center sacrifice zones? Communities where there's been strong investments in water, electricity, and networking infrastructure. Higher income communities, communities that are used to other folks sacrificing for them. The map on the left shows the first wave of data center build-out in Georgia. Metro Atlanta is the state's most populous region, followed by Augusta. The facilities are clustered accordingly around big cities with good infrastructure. The map on the right shows the second wave of development. These stories you're hearing about data centers overrunning small communities or moving into traditional sacrifice zones, they're rooted in this second wave. While developers are still trying to squeeze facilities into Atlanta and Augusta, you can see that they're clearly expanding their focus across the state and looking to build clusters in less populated, less resourced areas. The same process is playing out internationally. There's no more room to build in Ireland, Brazil, or Switzerland, and residents of better resourced European cities are starting to ask uncomfortable questions. So developers are moving to less resourced communities, indigenous land in Canada and South America, small countries in the Caribbean. The Kenyan president just canceled its premier data center build because turning it on would mean cutting off power to half the country. While all of the current attention is on the second wave, quietly, rich communities all over the US, South America, and Europe have already been sacrificed. The second difference between 20th century and 21st century sacrifice zones is who we're sacrificing for. The intent of the traditional sacrifice zone was to sacrifice the few for the sake of the many. While some small part of the community would suffer, the rest would flourish. But the intent of the 21st century AI data center sacrifice zone is the exact opposite. We're demanding that the many millions of Americans across the country sacrifice for the benefit of the moneyed few. No matter what Gen AI is capable of in the who knows how distant future, it isn't helping any of those communities right now, unless they're stockholders in the handful of companies on the circular financing wheel. And it's not enough. There aren't enough sacrifice zones in the US to satisfy the insatiable appetites of our fully entrenched AI establishment. They require ever more scale. America is no longer content with building individual sacrifice zones, so we've now placed the world on a sacrifice timeline. Every community is up for grabs. We've used our nearly unparalleled marketing skills to create a sense of inevitability and FOMO smokescreen that national and international governments, business leaders, and normal folks alike have enthusiastically embraced. Every community on the planet is a high voltage power line, a water source, and one enthusiastic local leader away from being sacrificed in the name of productivity and corporate profits that overwhelmingly accrue to a handful of Americans. A country's technology houses its belief systems and culture. This is what you're bringing over when you bring our tech, our data centers, our way of doing business into your country. So when you create localization rules around our tech or use our models and architecture as a template to build your own, you are actively embedding our sacrifice culture into your own. This presentation is meant to strip all of that away, to shine a spotlight on the man behind the curtain and provide you the opportunity to make an informed choice. You see who we are. You see what we're doing to ourselves, and you see how this one technological tool has fundamentally changed our country. Now ask yourself, are we happy? Of all the Americans you know, how many of us seem happy to you? Even those of us who are making money in the Gen AI game or think it's making part of our lives easier, how many of us have told you that our lives have been fundamentally improved by this technology? Do you see the trade-off we're making here? As you're flying back home after this conference and you have some time to reflect, please ask yourself, how much of your community, your health, your social cohesion, your local environment, your social safety net, how much of your country's timeline are you willing to sacrifice to end up like us?